Joining me now is filmmaker and Sanders campaign surrogate Michael Moore. He's also the host of the new podcast, Rumble with Michael Moore. Michael, always good to see you. I see that you voted.
Yes, I did. I voted today, although I'm in New York. But
absentee ballot?
I was going to say, well, no, we're in the same time zone. So
we are.
I could vote at 7 a.m. in Michigan and still be here right now.
Yeah, you could have flown. So what's going to happen in Michigan?
But no, yes, absentee. I don't know. Who knows? It's Michigan. 4 years ago this week, we were told on primary day that morning on Channel 2 in Detroit, they had the new poll from the Detroit Free Press and whatever, CBS, and it said that Hillary was going to win today by 21 points. 13 hours later, she'd lost to Bernie Sanders.
And Bernie Sanders is, and I assume you are hoping that the same thing happens today.
Well, of course, yes. But I think it's hard to predict this because the people in Michigan have really been through the ringer over the last few decades and have been very upset with how things have gone, to the point where in 2016, in the general election, many, many people who did not like Donald Trump ended up voting for him because they just saw him as their Molotov that they could throw into the system.
And there is now reporting out there, and voters have said this, that or the numbers have borne this out, that a lot of those votes were more anti-Hillary votes than they were pro-Bernie Sanders votes for Sanders in the primary or pro-Donald Trump for Trump in the general election. And
if should Biden be the nominee, I don't think it'll be the same anti-Hillary sentiment, but there will be an anti-Biden sentiment, not so much because of himself personally, but because people don't see that as real change. And people have been told for way too long, especially people who are struggling to live from paycheck to paycheck, that things are going to get better. And the Democrats are going to come in and save us. We were told that in Flint with the water crisis, that things would be turned around, and it didn't happen. We begged the Obama-Biden administration for almost 2 years to please send in the Army Corps of Engineers to dig up the poison pipes and replace them. And we couldn't get anywhere with that. Now we have a Democratic governor who, the level of frustration, it's hard to explain this, and it's not so much a partisan thing. People don't think of themselves as Democrats or Republicans. They are trying to get by. And Michigan has been, like I said, it's been a very difficult few decades, and nobody sees the cavalry coming to help them get out of the mess.
Let me read to you something that was written in the New York Times about Sanders' support. The Sanders campaign has exposed a class divide within the Democratic Party.
Yes.
His promises of a leg up are most alluring to those who need it and most confounding to those who do not.
Oh, that's beautifully put. Yeah, that is very true. And so if you're a single mom and you can't afford daycare, which means then you can't take those college classes that you'd like to take, because there's no way to afford that. If you're saddled with, even with Obamacare, people have these high deductibles, they can't afford them, people get their wages garnished because they didn't pay the hospital bill. If you're one of those people, and there are a lot of them in Michigan, because Biden talks about how much they saved Detroit. Well, they didn't save Detroit. Detroit and Flint are still in serious need of help. They saved General Motors and Chrysler, but they saved it by setting it up so that any new workers coming in as auto workers would be paid $15 an hour. Well, who can really live on that if you have a family? And so when people hear him say, yeah, we did this, well, then why does Detroit and Flint still look the way it looks?
Well, let me ask you this. Detroit is Michigan is a really interesting place because you have those suburban mom voters that were so important in 2016. You have all of the black vote across the socioeconomic scale in Michigan that was so important in 2016. They didn't show up. You have those working class voters who showed up for Donald Trump. What is Bernie Sanders looking at? So far, we haven't seen turnout among young people like he had expected. Who are his people in Michigan?
Bernie's people are the people who are filled with an incredible, profound sense of despair, who feel debilitated and demoralized by a system that hasn't benefited them. And when you say that the people that didn't vote in 2016, I don't think that they're not apathetic.
No, they just didn't turn out for Hillary Clinton.
They just gave up. They've given up. And in 2018, though, they came back in Michigan. And we threw out all the Republicans in the top echelon of Lansing, the capital. We've got all Democrats, a woman governor, a black lieutenant governor, a lesbian attorney general, and a single mom who's the Secretary of State. That's who we voted in 2 years ago. And we passed 2 ballot measures in 2018 to outlaw gerrymandering and to legalize marijuana. Because those ballot measures were on the ballot, a lot of people came out. A lot of young people voted. It was our record turnout for young people in an off-year election. So young people will come out. African Americans will come out. But if they feel like it's just the same old politics, the same old game, a lot of people just have thrown their hands up to this. And I know I wish they didn't, but me wishing it isn't going to make it go away.
Well,
and Bernie
it's true.
Is inspiring, I think, to a lot
50% of the public just doesn't vote in elections. There is a problem with not just voter suppression, but voter apathy in this country. People who look at the system and say to themselves, I don't think I'm going to change anything if I vote Republican, Democrat. Yes. It's all the same. Let me ask you this, though.
And the people in power love that when people give up.
Of course they do.
love that.
Of course, because people in power for a reason.
They're happy.
But let me ask you this, and I don't presume to know what's going to happen tonight. If Bernie Sanders does not win, what does that say about his message and how it's reaching people? It
means we've been through the 4th inning now, and Bernie's behind by a run or 2. That's all it is. We haven't even had the votes come in from California. I mean, where is that? It's our largest state.
It takes them a while. They have so many mail-in ballots.
Well,
it takes them a long time
shame on the Democrats then for
it's always been the case for California.
Really?
Yeah, they always.
Has there always been mail-in voting?
Yes,
that's new.
That's new, but it's always taken a longer time given the size and the population.
Yeah,
there are 20 million mail-in ballots.
How many people in California? Almost 40 million?
Yep.
And there's almost 30 million here in New York State. So that's 70 million. So that means 1 out of 5 Americans, actually less than that, but 1 out of 5 Americans live in California or New York. We've heard from California, they want Bernie. We've heard from part of it, but it looks like the rest will. And we haven't heard from New York yet. We're not through this. The other states have a right to vote. Joe Biden, according to your map, 652. You need 1991. All right? I don't think, maybe that's a third of what he needs.
So what I hear you saying is this should play out and we should see where we are before the convention.
Especially because all your exit polls show that maybe people don't necessarily vote for Bernie, but they vote for his policies. Every exit poll has shown the majority of Americans in all these early primary states, they want Medicare for all. They want the minimum wage to go up. They believe in Bernie's policies. They believe that climate change is real.
Medicare for All has been exit polling really well. Minimum wage has been exit polling really well. I wonder, though, if Bernie does not get the nomination, what that says about his candidacy. If his ideas are polling well, but he doesn't end up winning. But again, I don't presume to know.
I know, but the ideas are always more important than the man or woman.
Yeah.
It's the ideas. Look, this is a long struggle. Bernie has built a huge movement, and I've been encouraging people to get on board that movement. Don't sit this one out. We won't get a chance like this again for a long time. It's so important to people watching right now in Michigan to vote. I know people in Washington State wondering if they should go. I don't know what you're reporting on the coronavirus. By the way, can I just end by saying something about that?
Sure.
President Trump just had a lunch meeting with the Republicans on Capitol Hill. I was watching it in the green room. This is not a partisan issue. Why is he meeting just with the Republicans? He should be meeting with all the members. To make this a partisan issue and to make this an issue about numbers, he wants the numbers to look low. Every time you hear on MSNBC show that map with how many cases there are in each of the states, everybody knows that's not a real map because we haven't been tested.
We haven't tested everybody.
No, and the people who are sick can't get a test. So it's a false sense of security if it's creating that in anybody. I don't think it is.
And experts say they expect those numbers to go up once more of those tests go out. And as you said,
where were the tests?
Trump meeting with Republicans. Jake Sherman pointed out just a moment ago that there hasn't been a lot of outrage to Democrats on what they think should happen with the stimulus. Michael Moore, always good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for voting.
Thank you, and thank you for every time you quote Fish on the show. I think that's
we're going to surrender to the flow of the rest of this show. Don't forget to check out Michael's podcast, Rumble with Michael Moore. Michael, thank you very much.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.